Qing's novella Beauty on the Crossroads, preface by Zhang Eileen. What Qing and I are not as close friends as most people think. In fact, we rarely meet. They are not hostile to each other, as some people may imagine. It seems inevitable that peers will be jealous of each other. Not to mention that they are all women. All women are peers. But I think there is something special here. Even from a purely selfish point of view, I would like to have a person like Qing exist. I would like her to write more, and I would like many people to know her benefits. Because to underestimate the value of Qing's articles is to underestimate modern culture. Level. If female authors must be specially divided into a separate column for review, then I really cannot be proud of comparing myself with Bingshan and Bai Di. I am only willing to be compared with Qing. As for the personal relationship, if she and I only have a business relationship, and she is perfunctory with me in order to get manuscripts, and I am perfunctory with her in order to get royalties, that may be closer to the truth. But I always feel that there is no emotion at all, nor I think I like her more than she likes me because I know her better. That's not because she's easier to understand. Ordinary people think that her personality is very clear. She talks a lot and speaks directly, but she is not a superficial person who can see everything. People cannot understand her good points and still like to be friends with her. Just as her books can have many readers who do not understand its good points, many people who are not originally interested in literature and art still want to buy a copy of 10 Years of Marriage to see if there are extensive descriptions of sex life in it. I think they were a little disappointed, but they could still find some information to laugh at. The fact that the public accepts 10 Years of Marriage with this attitude does not undermine the value of 10 Years of Marriage. In the past, when the public accepted Dream of Red Mansions, how many of them didn't do it because they had an unrequited love for Sister Lin or Brother Bao, or because they liked the wealth and ostentation in it? Even in Dream of Red Mansions, everyone wanted to change the ending before they were satisfied. It is completely close to the hearts of the public, and even seems to grow out of their hearts. It is also a high-level art. It is not that there are such things, such as some old plays and some folk tales, which have a long history. Examples in plastic arts are especially many. But there is no way to use this as a standard for creation. Catering to the public may influence their temporary likes and dislikes, but it cannot last long. Moreover, it is impossible to write a sincere book like Qing if you deliberately cater to her. And no matter what, wouldn't it be great if Qing's books could sell more and make money, and the literati could help themselves instead of waiting for help from others? I think 10 Years of Marriage is a little worse than Huanzhenji. When Qing is at his best, he can achieve a kind of vast kindness that is as close as the world is to him, awakening the ubiquitous memory of wifely and maternal nature in the past. Everyone is familiar with it, but it is easy to ignore it. But it is really great. She is the great man and the woman is her. But I suddenly thought of one thing. When she was divorced and first came out to look for trouble, her situation most accurately represented ordinary women. And her current status is very special. The living environment of a female writer is different from the ordinary career. Women, female staff, and female teachers are very different. Those around Qing also have a special habit and cannot represent ordinary men. Qing's observation attitude has always been very subjective and direct. So although this is everything, the crisis of working women, I was particularly concerned about this for Qing. There were 2 articles that she wrote so poorly that when I read them, it felt like I was walking into an old room with all the same furnishings. But the master was not at home, and he felt very melancholy. Some people criticize her for not being skilled enough. In fact, her skills are unconscious and cannot be appreciated by the more childlike author and readers who like to be fancy. People use the big hat of art to suppress her, and she can only get angry. Gradually, she will become more considerate. Let's talk about it later. Now let's talk about her person. She once asked me, "Why is there never anyone in your novels who looks like me?" I've been paying attention, but I can't find him. When I look at people, I tend to look down on them easily. Flat little paper figures are more convenient to put in a book. Looking flat does not necessarily mean discovering someone's shortcomings, but it just means turning a three-dimensional person into a flat one. Just like the shadow of a flower on the white wall, it has already been drawn there. just waiting to be stroked with an ink pen. Because I am a writer of novels, I think this is my duty, to see the ins and outs of life clearly. If there was hatred in the heart at first, after understanding it, there is only pity. What I see with my eyes is that some very talented people clearly made a wrong step somewhere, and later on, no matter what happened, they couldn't do it anymore because their overall attitude towards life was bad and sneaky. Some of them are not bad, they're just worthless, unclean, and unpleasant. There are many people like this in my books because they can best represent the atmosphere of society, and they are also easier to write about. In the past, people said that it is easy to draw ghosts and monsters, but it is difficult to draw people. It seems that miracles, such as saints, heroes, demons, and witches are relatively common and easy to express, but that is a matter of the depth of realistic skills. Realistic techniques have advanced to the level of Tolstoy, but in his novels, it is a group of small characters who are most successful in writing, while the great central characters always appear vague and vaguely feel inadequate. Not to mention second-rate writers, they always write the worst about their good guys. So I thought, let's take it slowly and step by step, and try again when I have more confidence. The people I write about, I can forgive whatever is wrong with them, and sometimes I still love them, just because they exist and they are real. But when I meet them in daily life, because of my naivety and incompetence, I know that I will gain nothing by mixing with them. If there must be contact, it will be a battle, with no room for compromise, and a clear distinction between grudges and grudges. But like Qing, even if she offends me in some way, I will not hold a grudge, not because she is a woman. When she first wrote me a request for manuscript, she said, "It's about people of the same sex." I always laughed when I read it. It's not because she is bold and generous, unlike a woman. First, I don't like masculine women, and Qing is not a masculine woman at all. She has all the weaknesses of a woman. She cries easily, is too preoccupied, and is often irrational. For example, in the dialogue meeting 2 days ago, at the beginning, she made a comment about women's careers. Someone from the magazine raised a question and said, but she pondered for a while. Her face slowly turned red, and suddenly she became a little angry, and said, "I'm not talking to you. I want you to refute it." What do I do? Everyone laughed, and she laughed too, which I thought was very cute. Even in her writing, she has no extraordinary rationality. Her rationality is nothing more than common sense, although common sense is also a rare thing. There might have been some resentment between her and her husband at first, but when they got to the stage of divorce, they became calm and saw things very clearly and simply. Her husband is not bad. He is just a young man. If they can stay at home as young master and young mistress for the rest of their lives, their relationship can be maintained. However, the collapse of the social system behind him exposed his irresponsibility. He cannot support the family, and his pride limits her career development. And Qing's temper is such that even if he tries to compromise, it won't work out. Only separation. This reminds me of myself. Before I ran away from my father's house, my mother secretly sent me a message. Think about it carefully. You are naturally rich if you follow your father. If you follow me, you don't have any money. You have to eat. After suffering this, I have no regrets. Even though I was imprisoned and longed for freedom, this problem still caused me pain for a long time. Later, I thought that at home, even though all I saw was money coming in and out, it was not mine, and it might not be my turn in the future. Instead, the last few years of schooling were delayed. After thinking this way, I decided immediately. There was nothing impassioned about such a departure. Our era is not meant to be romantic. Living now, it is really difficult to continue living and live satisfactorily. It is as difficult and huge as splitting the road of life and death with both hands. Therefore, people of our generation can have a better understanding of material life and life itself. It is also appropriate to be happy with love. For me, Qing symbolizes material life. I want a Chinese-style room in the future, with snow-white walls, gold-lacquered tables and chairs, red chair cushions, tea bowls with pea-green glutinous rice porcelain on the table, and a bowl of cakes piled high, with dots on each one. A rouge spot. Chinese houses have the so-called one light and two dark, which is of course the light room. There's a bit of Su Qing's air here. This article was originally about Su Qing, but it talked a lot about myself. I'm really sorry, but there are many things that need explanation, and I can only explain it myself. When it comes to material things, luxury seems to be inseparable. But I feel that stimulating pleasure is like filling a bathtub with a shallow amount of water. Sitting in it, the heat rises, and you get a hazy pleasure. However, after all, it is shallow, and even if you lie down, it cannot submerge your whole body. People with more complex thoughts, no matter how absurd, can hardly achieve complete indulgence. Maybe I don't know enough to think this way. My first impression of sensual dogs and horses was once when I was a child. I stayed at my aunt's house. She had a party in the evening and went out, leaving me alone in the apartment. The Yuan dog running track across the door had countless red and green lights. Little by little, in the dark night, the barking of dogs is like boiling, which makes people feel confused. A car passed by on the street. Its bright headlights shone into the window, and the shadows of the furniture in the dark room danced all over the room and flew to the roof. I have long forgotten this section. There was a relatively intense air raid some time ago, and we did not have the financial strength to escape because escaping is not a temporary thing, but requires us to stay in a place with nothing to do for a long time. So we resigned ourselves to the bombing, but in case of a long term, even if the water is cut off, we have to try to leave the city. I suddenly remembered the bustling traffic lights and the barking of dogs in the fog. I was sitting alone in a dark room with no electricity. There was a white candle lit in the magnetic vat, and a small green cloud dragon protruded from the yellow magnetic vat, quietly holding the round light in its mouth without spitting out. There was dead silence in Shanghai, and the only thing that could be heard was the ticking of a clock in the room. The candle was placed on a glass plate on top of the hot water, and the hot water pipe was vaguely illuminated. A small arrow pointed to on and another small arrow pointed to off, as if it was another life. Today, a tabloid was delivered as usual. Holding it in my hand, I felt a strange feeling, one of intimacy and sadness. By candlelight, I arduously read, "What is it?" and in a familiar tone. He said witticisms about big cakes, white newspapers, and the nouveau riche, recalling with emotion the golden age of the past, when 3 yuan was enough to call a waiter. All this was not owned by me at this time, but seeing it destroyed was still sad. For thousands of city dwellers, there was nothing else. A clock ticked louder and louder as I walked. In the future, there may not be a single clock on the entire earth. If you stay in a deserted village at night and suddenly hear the ticking of a pendulum, you will be surprised and delighted. The rhythm of civilization. Civilized days are clearly divided minute by minute, like flowers on a cross cloth. The cross has a cross stitch, which I don't like. There are also dogs and people embroidered on it, all with one piece of music and one frame after another. It's very uncomfortable to look at it. In the wild days and nights, there are no clocks, just leisurely day and night. Day and night. The days pass like the purple halo on the light green background of Zhang kiln, which is good. Then I thought that I myself was also full of plans. When I was studying in Hong Kong, I worked really hard and won 2 scholarships. After graduation, I still hope to be sent to the UK. I can figure out the thoughts of every professor, so I always get the first place in every assignment. There was a gentleman who said that he had been teaching for more than 10 years and had never given me the marks he gave me. Then the war came and all the school records were burned, leaving no trace behind. That kind of effort, even if it achieves success, is destined to be overturned, right? During my 3 years there, perhaps the most beneficial thing for me was to take my time to travel around, see people, and chat. But at the time, I was always forced to do so, and I was very reluctant to do so, thinking it was a waste of time. I sat alone, guarding the candle, thinking about the past, thinking about the present, whether what I have been busy with in the past 2 years is destined to be overthrown. I should know it. Later, when I saw Heaven and Earth, I learned that Su Qing also felt very sad on the same night. However, this doomsday day finally passed. Day after day, lying in bed early in the morning, I heard the sound of the curtains squeaking in the room next door. At the back door, 2 men from an unknown family were talking to our grandma. I only heard a high-pitched buzzing voice. I didn't know what to say. After hearing the sound, It makes me feel even more that I am deeply asleep in bed. There should be white frost on the roof tiles outside. In fact, the frost on the roof is something I often saw when I got up early in the morning when I was a child in the north. It is rare in Shanghai. I always like not to see it. The curtains are closed, and you can see daylight as soon as you open your eyes. Even though I knew nothing would happen on this day, this dignified beginning was cute. At night, I sat by the brazier and was about to go to bed. I poked and smashed the charcoal base, which made me feel very warm for a moment. The charcoal chips gave off a lot of heat, and the stars were red and scattered among the ash piles high and low, like the Lantern Festival in Shanxing. The fireworks set off can't help but remind people of the Tang family's lantern market records. But I'm so ridiculous. I used iron tongs to clamp the red charcoal base that looked like red bayberry, but I couldn't bear to break it. After breaking into pieces, it burned brightly and disappeared. Although I was about to go to bed and it would be useless to continue burning, I was still very heartbroken. I quite like this kind of stinginess. I have a thin blue-green cotton robe. It has been worn very well, and the cuffs are stained. I took it out this year, put it on, and took it off again, because it is almost broken. I value it even more. I always have to wear it. I won't be willing to wear it until I have another one of the same color. I also pay attention to variety when eating vegetables. I picked up my chopsticks and said, "It's delicious," and then said, "I'll buy it tomorrow." Okay, I won't get tired of it if it continues forever. My aunt always laughs at me for this and says, "But I don't know, maybe your temper is a blessing." I had a dream that I went to Hong Kong again. When the boat arrived, it was late at night and it was raining heavily. I carried my suitcase up the mountain in embarrassment to meet the Catholic nuns who were in charge of the dormitory. I didn't dare to wake them up, so I had to spend the night in the dark doorway. I don't know why I want to portray myself so pitifully, and why they treat me like this. The wind direction changed, and the cold rain swept in harder. I shrank my feet again and again, but there was still no place to hide. Suddenly I heard a car horn honking, and a wealthy guest came. A benefactor's wife brought her daughter, who had just been admitted to the university and would live there in the future. The driver banged on the door, and the dormitory suddenly became brightly lit. I took advantage of the chaos and ducked in, and when I saw the dormitory, I smiled apologetically and said "sister" as I stepped forward. She nodded lightly and said, "Are you here too?" I didn't say much, so I went upstairs and found my room, and I never stopped dreaming here. I told my aunt the next day, and while I was talking, my face gradually turned red and my eyes filled with tears. Later, I told a friend on the phone and cried again. I mentioned this dream in a letter, and I cried again while writing this. It's ridiculous. It's been rare for me to shed tears since I grew up and became independent. I said to my aunt, "Although I have experienced a lot, I have never had this kind of experience. I have never been a poor student or a poor relative. In fact, I was not that poor when I was in Hong Kong. It was all because my classmates were too rich." My aunt said, "When have you ever been a poor relative?" I said, "I remember one time when I had just left my father's house." My aunt said that when she went through the boxes, she would find some of my cousin's old clothes for me to wear. I quickly said, No, really, aunt, don't." My face immediately turned red and tears rolled down. I couldn't help but think, since when will it be my turn to be helped? It's really stingy to remember all these things so firmly, but I think it's good for me. I have been hurt a little, but not too serious, not enough to make me feel intense hatred, or make me excited and surpass all this. It's just enough to make me live more realistically and have a realistic foundation, to make me know how to cherish everything in front of me, and make this world seem richer. When I think of poverty, I remember a time when I went to live with my mother and aunt. I felt that I should not be a burden to them, and I was not sure about my future. My aunt was always in a bad mood, but one day she was suddenly happy because I wanted to eat buns. I used ready-made sesame paste as stuffing, pinched for small buns, and steamed them. The buns were wrinkled, and looking at them made my heart wrinkled, as if I was grabbing a handful, and my throat was choking. I didn't know what the food tasted like after eating it. It seemed that I still smiled and said delicious. I can't bear to think about this incident, but I am willing to think about it. Looking at the records in Su Qing's articles, although her difficult situation for a period of time was different from mine, I think the degree of emotional impact was similar to mine. So we both have very obvious worldly ambitions, and we are much more straightforward about money than ordinary literati. There are many differences in our lifestyles, but that is related to personality. My aunt often said to me, "I don't know where you got this vulgarity from." She analyzed my parents. Even though they have shortcomings, they seem to be quite good. Sometimes I suspect that my vulgarity is just to avoid suspicion, afraid of being tainted by the famous local style. Sometimes I think it is natural vulgarity. I wrote a promotional article for the play Love in a Fallen City. When I was drafting the title, the first thing that came to my mind was talking about the fallen city with all my heart and courage, which was based on the title of talking about the 20 years of alpha life. It has always been very fashionable, but when I learned it, it became vulgar. Qing is the two tall willow trees in front of her house, which pulled out light golden silk in early spring. Everyone said, "The willows in your place are so beautiful." She walked in and out, and I never saw her, but her vulgarity often had a kind of unintentional elegance. For example, before the Chinese New Year this year, she was short of money, so she hurriedly took her rickshaw in the heavy snow, loaded with books, and sold them everywhere. The books fell again, and the dragon and phoenix style cover of 10 Years of Marriage rolled in the snow. It was really a fine picture. I used to have many opinions about Qing's dressing, but now I can understand her point of view. For her, a sophisticated dress is a sophisticated dress. For her, it is useful. For everyone, it shows her status. For the people she intends to attract, it is attractive. There is very little playing with the world in Qing's style. Last autumn, she made a black woolen coat, and when she tried it out, she asked Yin Ying to take a look at it. The three of us went to the fashion store together, and Yin Ying said, simple lines are most suitable for her. First, remove the lapel on the coat, the decorative pleats, the large square pockets, and the excessive shoulder padding. Finally, remove the row of large buttons in the front and change it to dark red. Qing gradually disapproved and said in a negotiating tone, "I think buttons are necessary. Everyone has them. It seems a bit funny without them." I laughed beside her, with my hands in my raincoat pockets, looking at her. A lamp on the top of the mirror shone a strong green light on her face, against the wide black clothes below, and the background was also shadowy, which made her face more clearly visible, a little pale. It was rare for her to stand quietly like this, looking at herself, although she was smiling, because she had never been so quiet before, and when she was quiet, she seemed to have a kind of sadness, and there was a kind of sharp edge in her compact and bright eyebrows, which reminded me of Gone with the Wind. Qing is a person of prosperity in troubled times. She is honest and kind-hearted, and she is willing to rely on someone. As long as there is a banquet that lasts for 1,000 years, she can be busy and happy like the granddaughter-in-law in Dream of Red Mansions who works hard to take care of it and invite people to eat. She has a strong sense of family. She helps her mother, brothers and sisters, and uncle with all her heart, even if it is beyond her scope of responsibility. In this unreliable world, if you want to grasp something familiar and reliable, it is still your own people. She loves children because I would rather let my own children take advantage of me than let others take advantage of me. Her love also requires trustworthy people, not seeking excitement. She should be an ideal object for high-level flirting. Smart people say that she is experienced, can say anything, and can see things clearly, but she is too serious and can't relax. Maybe she thinks she is relaxed, but she will immediately blame others for being irresponsible. Is this a contradiction of women? I think it is because she has a simple and healthy foundation. The first condition of advanced flirting is distance, not necessarily physical. Keeping distance is to protect one's feelings and avoid pain. Applied to other things, this can be said to be the basic thought of modern people. As a result, life is understated, and there is distance between life. Qing often cannot jump out of the circle of popular ideas and theory, but it is a joke to advocate distance with Qing, because she is such a lively person. She can't stretch or shrink, and be careful about every step. I speculate about her purely with the attitude of writing a novel. And there must be many mistakes, but this is all I can do. Once I talked about Qing with Yin Ying, and Yin Ying said, I think her biggest attraction is Men always feel that they don't owe her anything, and they are very happy to be with her. However, Qing thought that this was where she suffered a loss. Men looked up to her and treated her like a man, and she was responsible for everything. When she refused, they said she was contradictory, saying that she wanted both the freedom of new women and the rights of old women. This was the tragedy of new women in general, but we cannot say that Qing brought it upon herself. Her boldness was innate. She was just a straightforward woman who sought love in addition to making a living, but was very disappointed because she looked around and found no one she liked, and some were very stupid and bad. She also had her naive side, easily fantasizing about people as very noble, and then quickly discovered his despicable points, and again. Her dreams were shattered. So she said, "There is no love." There is a kind of contempt in her smiling eyes, but her irony is not thorough, because she has the basic love for life. She can't develop to the point of deep irony. In China now, irony is easy to please. In the previous period, everyone was sentimental, full of dreams and sighs of miners in the clouds and fog. Not very sensible. Once you are sensible, you will see through everything and enter the irony. Comedy is not irony. Comedy is meaningless and whitewashes irony reality. Originally, irony is a necessary stage to clear away those cliched sentimentalities, but it is easy to stay at irony and not know that there can be emotions besides sentimentality, because all you see is incomplete things. You regard this incompleteness as reality. Sex is sexual behavior. Primitive people don't live well without our fancy things. Yes, but we have been civilized to this point, and it is impossible to retreat to the health of animals. I was forced to read the Bible in school. There was a verse that I can't remember clearly, but it seemed to say that God's servants each received money to do business. Those who received more could get more. Those who received less could not even keep that little. God returned the money and punished him. I felt very unfair when I read it at that time. The meaning was really difficult to understand. I wanted to explain it a little more here, but I was afraid that I couldn't explain it clearly. In short, life is cruel. Seeing our timid wishes shrinking again and again, I always feel infinitely sad. For a while, there were rumors that Qing and her divorced husband reconciled. I have never been a nosy person, but I was very worried when I heard it. Later I learned that it was completely a rumor, but it made sense when I thought about it. Her initial marriage was mostly decided by her family. They were both very young and grew up together. Her husband was almost born there, and there was no choice. He was like a brother. If you feel that he is still a family member, in every way, then you will feel close to him. Not to mention that they didn't have any serious problems in getting along. However, her divorce was not out of anger, but after careful consideration. She ran away, walked a path in the world, felt bored, and went back. Qing couldn't stand denying the world and herself in this way. She would become mute and depressed. So I thought, if Qing had another lover, whether for a moment of passion or financial help, it would be better than returning to her husband. However, she seems to be really a little tired now. Career, love, children around, mother in distress in her hometown, brother suffering from lung disease in the mainland, sister also has her problems. So many concerns. For a person with such a strong vitality, she would not be exhausted no matter how many things drag on. Or it is because these things are too fragmented, each in its own way, lacking a unified emotion. If love can be separated as a part of life, a subject titled love, then such love is still a substitute. Qing talked to me about her ideal life. The husband should be manly, not a gigolo. He should have heirs, even if he is a government official, but also a bit unrestrained. They live in their own house, often entertain guests, and their friends are all easy to talk to. Of course, they have many girlfriends, but they are all 2 years older than her and slightly less beautiful than her, so as to avoid trouble. The nature of her husband's job often requires short-term travel, so family life will not be too rigid and unchanging. When her husband is away, she can spare time to entertain his girlfriends because she is still worried. Occasionally, when she gets sick, friends come to visit, bring food and flowers, and the phone keeps ringing. It is definitely not an excessive request, but the living atmosphere here is still 2 years ago, which is gone now. Of course, it does not mean that there are no people living in their own small houses and entertaining guests exists every day. It is that kind of stable feeling. It is indeed difficult for one person to create the entire social atmosphere for her. But this is a matter of personality. The more chaotic the world is, the more prominent the personality is, and the difference between people is huge. Of course, it is difficult to find. If she feels that time is running out, then, if she really wants to say it is running out, her time has already passed. Doesn't the "in the mood for love" mentioned by the Chinese already feel like it is coming to an end? But since I was a child, I have seen many beautiful people in their 30s and 40s. In my original imagination, by Liu Su in Love in a Fallen City was definitely more than 30 years old. Because I was afraid that this point would not be accepted by the general readers, I changed her to 28 years old, coincidentally the same age as Su Qing. I later found out. Of course, the people I met were well-maintained and did not work hard like modern professional women. Once, I worked out a truth in a conversation with a friend. Women who have the secret of keeping their youthful looks are always 1. In good health, 2. With a stable life, and 3. Not stable in their hearts. Because they are not devoted. They always pay attention to their physical appearance and know to be careful. This is generally true. Su Qing can now live a leisurely life, and her beauty is the easiest to maintain, with contours and spirit. This section is full of laughable words, but it is really important. There are a few women who are loved for the beauty of their souls. The maid in our family, her husband is a useless tailor. However, after the air raid that day, I met him on the dark street. Seeing him rushing to our apartment to comfort his wife and children, it was touching. I told Su Qing this, and she also said yes and was silent for a while. When she fled, she was the only one who protected others, and no one protected her, so she has been particularly timid recently, and has many fantasies. Like a spoiled little girl in the darkness of nightmares, she would suddenly say, "If the bomb blows my eyes out, I will have to read out my manuscripts for others to remember in the future." That would be so terrible. This is not like her usual personality. If her mood is better, no matter what kind of adversity she is in, she still has a kind of innocence of life. More adversities are only good for her. More branches and twigs, more flowers. Originally, I wanted to write an article about several ancient beauties, but I always couldn't write it well. It mentioned young Gaifai. Young Gaifai was loved by Emperor Minghuang of Tang Dynasty until she died at the age of 38. I think she was not just eloquent and a little cunning, nor was it because she was the only woman with physical beauty in Chinese history, but because of her warmth and liveliness. It is a common misconception that money brings liveliness. The wealth of the imperial family, the lantern festival during the Tianbao period, the fireworks, the Emperor Tang Minghuang and his concubines sitting upstairs like gods, the people in large numbers downstairs worshipping, the carriages of the royal relatives inlaid with pearls and gems, the passers-by peeked inside, the fragrance on their bodies lasted for months, living in such a hazy and illusory stage. The more you need a real relative, so Emperor Tang Minghuang liked young Gaifai because she was a wife to him, not a concubine. Let's look at the process of Young Fei. In Mei Fei's competition for favor, Young Fei quarreled with the emperor several times, was expelled, and returned to her parents' home. It is simply a story in local news, which is very different from the conspiracy, secret, and miserable in the historical officialdom. It is this kind of place that makes them close to life, and allows us to be close to them thousands of years later. I think young Gaifei's liveliness is like a ceramic soup pot, warm and smooth like jade. When the water inside gradually cools down at the foot, it makes people feel gentle and melancholy. Su Qing is a small red clay stove, with its own independent fire. You can see the red flames and hear the explosions of chestnuts peeling off. But it is more difficult to serve. Add coal and firewood, and the smoke is choking. I think of Hu Jinren's painting again, which shows an old maid reaching out to the fire, the bleak tones of midwinter, gray-brown and purple-brown. She sits bent over, her huge body surrounding the small stove on all sides, and under her apron, she emits a sad cold air from all parts of her body, as if this reminds me of Su Qing. The whole society goes to Su Qing for warmth, rushes forward, and blows out gusts of cold wind. It is really cold weather, never so cold. So when I talked with Su Qing, I often felt reluctant to leave. I never understood why. She would complain, "You don't have a single straightforward word. You may not even understand what I say immediately. That was partly because of the dialect, but I was also really slow. I smiled apologetically and said, I am such a person. What can I do? But you know, as long as I have more time, I can understand whatever you say. She said, yes, I know I can understand it completely. However, a girlfriend can only understand at most, and a boyfriend can comfort me. Her witty remarks of this kind always sound a bit exaggerated and ridiculous, but when you think about it carefully, they're solid and true. Often when she has a wonderful discussion, I would say, why don't you write it down? But she opened her eyes wide, looked surprised, straightened her face, and said, how can I write this? But she may have thought afterwards that Zhang Eileen said it was okay to write, so it probably wouldn't offend people who don't read indecently, because, not many days later, this opinion appeared in her article. I felt very honored. She saw the article and pointed out a few paragraphs and said, this sentence makes sense. I laughed. You said it yourself. Of course you think it makes sense. Regarding the ambition, she said, yes, I always feel that I should move forward, upward, although it is very vague, and I don't really know what it means to move forward. Do you think there will be an ideal country in the future? I said, I think there will be, but it will take many years at the earliest. Even if we can see it, we can't enjoy it. It will be the world of the next generation. She sighed and said, what's the good of that? We will be old by then. In a peaceful world, will we become dependent on others? After she laughed, I was alone on the balcony at dusk. Suddenly, I saw a tall building in the distance. There was a large piece of rouge on the edge. I thought it was the reflection of the setting sun on a glass window. When I looked again, it was the moon of the Lantern Festival, rising red. I thought, this is a chaotic world. In the evening smoke, the border of Shanghai was slightly undulating. Although there were no mountains, it looked like mountains. I thought about the fate of many people, including me. I had a feeling of life experience. Feeling of life experience is what ordinary people always mean by self-harm and self-pity, but I think it can have a broader interpretation. The future peace will not be ours when it comes. We can only seek our own peace nearby. However, when I said these words to Su Qing, I could imagine her cynical, worldly wise eyes looking at me with a smile. While listening, she thought, I have no idea what you were talking about. Maybe it's art. When I saw her look like that, I couldn't continue and laughed.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.